Shana Tova. We're here again. A new year is upon us, and it's a very different year. Again, a year of uncertainty, of change, of resilience. A year when we had thought that we would be together for this service in person, and once more, we are not all together. And yet we've learned over the course of this year that we have been able to find connection and community even when we're not sitting in the same room, simply by being a community of practice, a community that is here to do the spiritual work of prayer and of the season. And I want to begin just by taking us through the year, taking ourselves through the year. So much has happened over the course of the past 12 months. Thinking back, if you can, to last Elul, last Rosh Hashanah, the days leading up to Rosh Hashanah. Where were you? Where were you sitting at this time? Who was with you? Who were you wishing was with you? What hopes did you have for the year ahead, for yourself and for the world? You move in the calendar from September to October, fully into the month of Tishrei, of celebration of Sukkot and Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah, a holiday of harvesting, of joyful celebration. In a year, another year of much loss, can you think of something that you gained this year? What benefits did you reap? Spiritual, emotional, relational, financial. Late fall turns colder as we move into the month of Cheshvan. November, and the natural world is slowly moving from that sense of bounty to more of a sense of quiet, barrenness, so that the cycle of birth, growth, death, rebirth can begin again. Last year, in the month of Kislev, the month of December, we celebrated Hanukkah, the festival of lights, a holiday of miracles. In what ways did you bring light or bring goodness into the world this year? In a year that was dark for so many, what was a miracle or a point of light for you? We moved through the winter, January and February, the Hebrew months of Tevet and Shvat, which saw Tu B'Shvat, the new year of the trees, a time of first blossoms heralding the spring. This was the time of year that the vaccine was on the horizon. Some of us had already received it, and we were beginning to make new plans to see friends and family, to hug our loved ones. What bloomed for you this year? What began to blossom? As we entered the month of Adar and celebrated Purim, a holiday of fun and revelry and merriment, we also marked the first anniversary of the pandemic's arrival in New York, remembering those final moments that we had spent together physically in community and in proximity to loved ones. And the holiday came, and we made merry, and we found joy nonetheless. What was a moment of true joy for you this year? A moment when you laughed deeply and fully. From March to April, from Adar to Nisan, spring, Pesach, Passover, renewal, freedom, more freedom than last year when most of us were confined to Zoom seders. How was Pesach different for you this year? Where did you find freedom this year? And then we counted 7 weeks of the Omer into the month of Sivan, toward the holiness of Shavuot, with a greater sense of freedom as the weather got warmer and things opened up a little bit. Was there something that you did for the first time this spring since the start of the pandemic? What was it like to re-experience that as if for the first time? Then we reach the holiday of Shavuot, of revelation. Think for a moment about the learning that you did this year. Something new you learned, an insight that was revealed. From June into July and August, the Hebrew months of Tammuz and Av, hot and humid, at least here in New York City. For some of us, a slowing of activity and a time to rest and breathe. In the Hebrew calendar, these are months of loss, thinking about history and brokenness. Think about the losses in your life this past year. In what ways did you grieve? As the summer progressed, uncertainty began to creep in anew, and here we are arriving once again at Rosh Hashanah with both the sense of possibility that a new year brings and perhaps a weariness. We've been on such a journey this past year, and maybe we're tired of the uncertainty, of the up and down, of the back and forth, and yet we have made it here another year. Rosh Hashanah 5782. And even as we sit with the uncertainty of what this new year will bring, the constant change, there are ways to draw strength, to feel hope. So what is one source of strength for you right now? And what is one hope you have for this coming year? Let's bring that strength and that hope to the journey of tshuva for ourselves and for the world, which begins by connecting with our own basic, fundamental goodness. The prayer of Elohai Neshama, an affirmation of the purity of our true souls. Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorahi. 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 We begin our prayer, as we do every morning, with Birkot HaShachar, blessings of gratitude. And in a moment, Dave will chant for us the first blessing, the blessing that expresses gratitude for God giving the rooster the ability to discern the difference between day and night. Such a strange blessing. Why do we say this? And we say that God has given Binah, a special type of wisdom, a special type of insight. It's the ability to see the spark of an idea. Binah is the ability to see something that's just on the horizon, to understand it and to expand it into something real. It's the type of wisdom that is referred to by the sages in this teaching from the Talmud, Ezehu Chacham Haro'eh et Hanolad. Who is wise? He who sees that which is being born. The rooster sees the new day about to be born, the smallest spark of the new day, and anticipates that the sun will soon rise. A new day will come into existence, and we want to be like this rooster, especially this year. We know that things need to be fundamentally different in our world. We've seen that, we've learned that painfully. If human life is to continue on planet Earth in a way that is remotely compassionate and just and sustainable, our task right now is to be like the rooster, to see that which is being born, hanolad, to anticipate that something that has never previously existed is possible. We can heed the words of this blessing, which was echoed by the playwright George Bernard Shaw and famously quoted by John F. Kennedy and Robert F. Kennedy, that some see things that are and ask why. I dream of things that never were and ask why not. Let us dream this year of things that have never been. Let us imagine anew what our world can look like, and let us use Binah, the wisdom that we have been given to the rooster and also to us, to see what is on the verge of being born. And let's bring a new world into being. Birkot HaShachar on page 1, followed by Baruch She'amar, the creation of the world, at the top of page 2.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam אשר נתן לשכלי בינה להבחין בין יום ובין לילה.
אמן.
ברוך שאמר והיה עולם, ברוך הוא. Hallelu, 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 hallelu. Kol hanshama tehalel ya, hallelu, hallelu. כל הנשמה תהלל יה, הללו, הללויה, הללו, 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 הללו. כל הנשמה תהלל יה, הללו, הללויה. כל הנשמה תהלל יה, הללו, הללויה. הללו, 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 הללו. הנשמה תהלל יה, הללו, הללויה. כל הנשמה תהלל יה, הללו, הללויה. כל הנשמה תהלל יה, הללו, הללויה. כל הנשמה תהלל יה, הללו,
Sitting for a moment with the reverberations of that chant. Rabbi Simcha Zissel Ziv, who was one of the leaders of the early modern Musar movement and the founder of the Talmud Torah Yeshiva in Kelm, would hang a sign on the door of his yeshiva in the days leading up to Rosh Hashanah. It read, "A kingdom is maintained only when the king's subjects are all like one person in their service to the king. And if division were to emerge among the subjects of the king, the knot of the kingdom would be untied, and God forbid, the world would be destroyed. Therefore, there is an obligation upon us prior to the day of judgment to occupy ourselves with the positive commandment, Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, you shall love your fellow as yourself, And through this, there will be unity, and God's sovereignty will come into our hands. We are about to introduce and emphasize one of the themes of Rosh Hashanah, the theme of Malchut, of God's sovereignty, God's kingship. And this is such a challenging idea to our modern minds. What does it mean for God to be our sovereign? I love this teaching from Reb Zissel Ziv because it answers this question by holding up a mirror to our own souls, our own society. There is no king, there is no sovereign without a nation. If there is disunity, if there is hate, if there is judgment, there is no nation, and there is no king. So maybe we can understand this declaration of Hamelech, the king, to be a declaration of our commitment to creating a nation of unity, to creating a community and a society that is full of love. So take a moment right now to bring to mind someone or something that you love. It's just easy to touch into that love. Notice the sensations in your body. Maybe there's a warmth in the chest, a smile on your face. And as we hear the declaration Hamelech, let's again commit to this love.
Hamelech Yoshev al kiseram v'nisa.
The blessing of Yotzer Or, the blessing for light in the morning. Yotzer Or uvorech choshech useh shalom uvorei takol. We praise the one who creates both light and darkness, who harmonizes sun and shadow both, who creates everything in this world. This blessing invites us to witness in wonder how we and the world are renewed day by day and moment by moment. The light of day reveals the world of nature, and it reminds us that we live every day in a garden suffused with love, a garden which has been entrusted to our care. Rabbi Arthur Green writes that God shines light upon the earth, and the trees in the forest stretch upward to receive that sunlight, converting its rays into the chlorophyll they need to exist. And the sun stands as a metaphor for the divine light, toward which all of nature stretches. we too stretch forth to receive that same light. We convert it into our chlorophyll, and we call it love. This is the stuff of life, the inner flow which allows us to be as fully human as the tree is fully tree. We verbalize that love, we share it, we turn it into teachings that help us to live, and we pass the love on to become ever more human, ever more aware of being made in the divine image. We are, says Rabbi Green, little engines of humanization humming away, translating that divine stream of energy into our beloved life-giving force of love. So wherever you are right now, I invite you to be still just for a few moments and find a position of dignity. And if you can see out the window, you can notice the energy of the light streaming into this world, illuminating it. The light around us enabling us to see both the beauty and the ugliness of this world. And reminding us also of the light within us, the pilot light that never goes out of our own soul, our sacred essential self. As we allow the chant of Yotzer Or to wash over us as the energy of the morning light suffuses this world, washing over and through us, let's sit and receive that light as the late summer leaves do. Let's notice how, as we take in and absorb the light, taking that stream of energy, it is transformed into the love that we need and which is waiting for us to manifest in this world.
עושה שלום ובורא את הכל.
The blessing that leads us into the Shema on page 3 invites us to practice yichud, unification, to bring together the exiled, the distant parts of ourselves, of our people, of our country, of our world. Ahava Rabbah, a great love, ends with each of us literally or symbolically gathering the tzitzit, the knotted fringes on the four corners of our talit, bringing them together in yichud, in unification, as we chant the words of Shema. And this requires, first of all, that we simply acknowledge the reality of exile, of brokenness, as individuals and collectively. We just notice, without judging harshly, the truth that we have strayed from our intentions. We have wandered away from connections. We have strayed from our awareness of what is true and enduring over the course of the year. We recognize that each of us carries wounds, each of us has a brokenness, and that we're all in exile from each other, from ourselves, and from God. And so I invite you to ask yourself, to drop into the pool of your mind these questions with great gentleness. To ask yourself, what part of yourself has wandered away and is waiting to come home right now? From what or from whom have you become exiled? With what or with whom do you yearn to reconnect? Perhaps there was an intention you set last Rosh Hashanah from which you have wandered away or become distracted, but to which you might return right here and right now. We gather together in our mind's eye those people, those intentions, those hopes which have been scattered over the course of the year, and we bring them all together as we bring the tzitzit together into one. And we pray as we do. V'havienu l'shalom me'arba kanfot ha'aretz. Bring us together, God, in wholeness from the four corners of the earth. V'tolichenu komamiyut li'artzenu. Help us see past distinctions. Help us remember that we are part of a common tapestry of your making. Lead us in dignity, every human being in dignity, to a shared sense of sacred purpose. Ki el poel yeshuot ata. V'keraftanu l'shimcha hagadol sela be'emet, l'hodot lecha, li'achedcha ba'ahava. Help us find the path to salvation. Help us find the path to connection as we gather these knotted fringes into one. Gather us through truth. Bind us into your great name that we might remember always to praise and to unify this broken world through the power of your love. Baruch Ata Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael. Inviting you to join me in chanting the words of the Shema. Shema Yisrael Adonai Adonai Echad. Inviting you, if your eyes have been closed, to gently open them. To always remember to return to your breath, to awareness of your body, awareness of the space in which you're davening right now. The blessings of light and of love lead us into the blessing of redemption. And as Shuli mentioned, we live in challenging and fearful times. And I find it helpful to remember that we're not the first. Innumerable generations before us have lived in and survived other such periods and have always found the resilience, the determination, the hope, the courage to persevere, to survive, and to thrive. Implanted within every human being and in every generation, including ours, is a sacred yearning, a capacity to move forward through every challenge, even those which are unimaginable, and to move forward towards a better future for ourselves and for those who will follow. Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav famously taught, Kol ha'olam kulo gesher tsar ma'od, the whole world is a narrow bridge. V'ha'ikar lo lefached klal, the main thing is not to be afraid at all. But actually, the conclusion of his teaching, as it is recorded, is a little bit different. Rather than lo lefached, not to fear, the recorded teaching is lo lehitpached. The main thing is not that we shouldn't be afraid, but that we shouldn't frighten ourselves beyond the fear we already experience. Fear is unavoidable, perhaps even a necessary part of moving forward. Courage involves moving forward despite our anxieties, moving through them and not exacerbating them. We're always crossing a narrow bridge. We're always standing at the sea between the oncoming Pharaoh and the waters which seem impassable. We always have challenges, anxieties, and fears which can cause us to tighten up or to fight or to flee or to avoid or to deny. So I want to invite you to join me in a short meditation to help us move through our fears and anxieties about the year ahead by simply acknowledging their presence. Inviting you again, if you are comfortable, to close your eyes or soften your gaze or just bring your awareness inward. You can anchor your attention in your breath, or in the sensations of your body, or the temperature of the air against your skin, or the sounds in the room or outside your apartment or your building. Whispering, Hineni, I'm here, I am present. I'm inviting you to scan your body gently, if you're comfortable doing so, just to notice the places where tightness and constriction reside. Maybe your shoulders or your neck, or other parts of your body which carry your anxiety, your nervous energy. As you note those, just do that with kindness, with compassion, as if you were visiting a friend who was struggling. And again, if you're comfortable, do so. I'd like to invite you to take your non-dominant hand and clench it and tighten it into a balled up fist and squeeze tight. Let that clenched, tightened hand hold your fear, your anxiety, your worries, your anger. Let it reside there for a moment. And then gently take your other hand, your dominant hand, and gently hold the other one, the clenched hand. Maybe caress it. Hold it gently but firmly, supporting it. Extending compassion and love to everything that concerns you, that weighs on you. Let that dominant hand that is holding the other whisper to the other, of course you're afraid. These are scary times. You're not alone. You are held, supported, and loved. I will be here with you as long as you need. And as you do, just check out in your own experience whether having your fears and worries and anxieties held and honored in love maybe dissipates a little bit of their power. And perhaps you can begin to unclench and soften and loosen the fingers of that hand. And I invite you slowly, slowly to open both hands, allowing them to face upward, allowing both the anxiety and the compassion to receive everything that they need, to receive the courage and hope we need to take the next step forward into the waters, into a new year, and to begin walking through the midbar of 5782 towards a better place, towards a promised land. Baruch atah Adonai, Ga'al Yisrael. Blessed are you, the source of redemption.
שפתי תפתח ופי יגיד תהילתך אדוני שפתי תפתח ופי יגיד תהילתך אדוני שפתי תפתח ופי יגיד תהילתך אדוני שפתי תפתח ופי יגיד תהילתך שפתי תפתח ופי יגיד תהילתך אדוני שפתי תפתח ופי
Zochrenu l'chaim, melech chafetz b'chaim. Remember us to life, mystery who loves life. V'chodvenu b'sefer ha'chaim, lema'ancha Elohim chaim. Inscribe us in the book of life. Help us return again and again to writing the story of life. Help us live in alignment with your will. May we notice and accept this invitation from God for us to turn again and again back to life, towards all of life, towards life's pains and disappointments, griefs and struggles, towards life's surprises and satisfactions, its joys and its blessings, its wonders. May this prayer remind us to grow in awareness of our human impulse to slumber, to fall asleep, to deny, avoid, to allow ourselves to be distracted, to miss out on life, to sleepwalk through it. May it remind us to turn again and again back to life. Zochrenu l'chaim, remember us, remind us of life. Melech chafetz b'chaim, mystery, who desires life, who awakens us every moment and calls us back to life. V'chodvenu b'sefer ha'chaim lema'ancha Elohim chaim. Inscribe us in the book of life and help us live in alignment always with your will.
זוכרנו לחיים, מלך חפץ בחיים, זוכרנו לחיים, מלך חפץ בחיים, וכותבנו בספר החיים, למענך אלוהים חיים, למענך אלוהים חיים, זוכרנו לחיים, מלך חפץ בחיים, זוכרנו לחיים, מלך חפץ בחיים, וכותבנו בספר החיים, למענך אלוהים חיים, למענך אלוהים חיים.
Because we are not here together in person and do not have a minyan of 10 adults, there are certain parts of the service that we're not saying, you may have noticed. And one of those is the next piyut, the next poem that would appear in our machzor, Le'el Orech Din. Le'el Orech Din, to the God, the one who arranges judgment. And this piyut describes God in many different ways, the first of which is listed here. Levochein levavot biyom din. God who probes, who examines hearts. Today, Rosh Hashanah, the day of judgment. And I think for many of us, if we're honest with ourselves, we might acknowledge that many times over the course of the year, we were probably the ones doing the judgment. We were the ones arranging justice and judgment in our minds. This person did this and it hurt me. This person slighted me this way. This person doesn't do things the right way. We've tried to sit in that seat of judgment. We've tried to probe the hearts of others. I know I have. And today we acknowledge that. We acknowledge and accept that because we are human, our minds judge, there is judging mind. But we say today, this isn't how we want to be. We don't know what is truly in the hearts of others. But what we can do is peer and probe into our own hearts. Maybe in those moments of judging others, if we turn inward, we might see in our heart that there's some suffering, some pain that's underneath our judgment. Having more honest clarity around that can break open our hearts to become less judgmental and more loving, and knowing that it is only the greatest power beyond ourselves that can truly judge, that can truly see into the hearts of other beings. And it is our work to peer and probe into our own hearts. That is an essential step towards tshuva.
בספר חיים ברכה ושלום ופרנסה טובה ניזכר וניכתב לפניך אנחנו וכל עמך בית ישראל לחיים טובים ולשלום. בספר חיים ברכה ושלום ופרנסה טובה ניזכר וניכתב לפניך לחיים טובים ולשלום.
We now enter the space of our own personal Amidah.
Hai, 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 dai. Hai, 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 hai. Hai, dai, hai, dai. Hai, hai. Hai, dai, dai, hai, hai.
So again, because we do not have a minyan, we're not taking out the Torah for a traditional Torah reading. So we thought we would do something a little different this year, which is for Mark and myself to have a conversation about the reading for this second day of Rosh Hashanah and reflect a little bit on the meaning of this reading, the purpose of today's reading, which is the chapter of Akedat Yitzchak, the binding of Isaac. And I think the question that comes up for many of us, and certainly in many of the commentators, is why is this the Torah portion that's read on Rosh Hashanah? Why is yesterday's Torah portion about Yishmael being sent out, why is that read on Rosh Hashanah? Why are these the sections of the Torah that we read, of all sections? If today is Hayom Harat Olam, if today is the birthday of the world, the day when we remember God's creation of the world, why are we not reading the book of Genesis? Why are we not reading that very moment when the world is created? What are we doing here? So one thought that I had, and then I'm curious to hear from you, Mark, is that even though we speak of today as the day of the original creation of the world and the birthday of the world, what actually matters, as we've been saying this whole time, as you said so beautifully earlier, is that it is our actions and our words that create worlds. And that's what matters today. And that's really what matters every day, but especially today. And we're reading these stories yesterday and this morning of really the creation of worlds, the actions of a parent towards a child that create a reality for that child. And I was thinking a lot in my own parenthood, how do my actions create worlds for my children? How did the actions and deeds of my parents create a certain world for me? And that this is maybe kind of the core relationship of our lives with our parents, our first relationships. That's what creates our world. And we want to be thinking about that today. The relationships that we come from and the relationships that we have now, and what are we creating?
Well, that's a scary thought as a parent. I think it's such a great question, and that's the intergenerational aspect of the Torah reading of both Torah readings yesterday and today are so much about the relationship between parents and who those who are either children or parents or sometimes both, but can relate to how fraught these stories are. The tension, the intergenerational tension, and the and relating to the what at least to us, to many of us appear as unwholesome parenting behaviors and reactions, which make us wonder, why are we reading about this in the Torah? But I love it. I love that the characters in Torah, are flawed and and struggle as I do, as those of us who are parents do, and those of us who are children do with our parents. So for me, I think two things I love about both. I will veer into yesterday also, but because they're both in some sense about unexpected hope. About surprise. They all have surprise endings. There's a classic kind of narrative, that leads to what's going to happen. Is this the end? And then there's a fresh hope. And what I like about them, I think, most is that there is a mindfulness quality there to each of them. Yesterday, in the reading where Ishmael and Hagar are sent away, there is the passage where Hagar basically turns away and throws up her arms and abandons all hope for her child, Ishmael. But because of the capacity to be present, even with the grief, a new possibility emerges. And I think it's Vayivkach Elohim et eineha. God opens Hagar's eyes, and she sees something that was there all along, but that she hadn't noticed, the well of water, and that life is sustained.
Yeah.
So it's a moment of waking up. So maybe that's the common theme here, is that both Torah portions are about waking, falling asleep and almost missing, what saves the day ultimately. And as parents, we want to be alert to every possibility of giving our children, life and a better possibility. And then today with the Akedah, I just every time look forward to Abraham lifting his eyes, Vayisa Abraham et einav, Vayar v'hine ayo. That Abraham, and that's a phrase actually that recurs throughout Genesis, that I think is just a wonderful, simple, in contemporary parlance, you can call it a mindfulness practice about waking up, lifting eyes, seeing, and then beholding. Something happens that makes him look up, see, and then he says, and he realizes there's an awareness that he didn't have before. And he's able to save the life of his child. Of course, we could say, well, it's his fault in the first place, but these are among the most challenging, problematic texts that we have in Torah. But for me, I guess the theme basically boils down to these are stories of awakenings, of awareness, and the shofar, which we're about to hear in a moment, is the tool that wakes us up, right, and represents it. This is the foundational story of the shofar, to remind us of the story and to remind us all to wake up. And to go back to what you were saying, to think about the power of our words, which almost, led Abraham astray, the power of, the destructive power of Sarah's words, or whatever was said between, Ishmael and Yitzchak. So that's what I've got.
I love that. I think the waking up is is definitely here. We have that language of opening eyes. And you made me think of two midrashim, two rabbinic teachings, which actually try to extend that waking up, that talk about Avraham, because what happens right after this narrative is that Sarah dies, and there's a lot of questions about why does that happen right after this incident with Yitzchak. And so one of the midrashim says that after Sarah dies, Avraham goes to try to reconcile with Ishmael. And there's another midrash that says that Yitzchak brings this woman, who's mentioned at the end of the reading today, who Avraham marries. He brings this woman to marry Avraham, and who's this woman? It's Hagar. That Yitzchak facilitates a reconciliation between Avraham and Hagar, or that Avraham goes and extends himself to try to reconcile with Yishmael. And I think those are extensions of this idea of waking up, that when we wake up, we see things that not only were there, that we didn't see before, but also we can take a step closer toward repairing those relationships, towards reconciling with the people that we've distanced or that we've hurt or we've been hurt by. And perhaps that's another aspect of what we're challenged to do by the reading today, is not just wake up to something we haven't been paying attention to, but then to see, what do I learn from that? How do I take the next step towards calling that friend I haven't spoken to in 10 years because we had a falling out, or a sibling or a parent or another loved one? That it's the waking up and also the next step that we're pushed to do.
And to bring it back to the parent-child relationship too, the awareness of, as parents, of the painful awareness of, the missteps we make and the lasting little, scars, large or small, that we leave on the next generation, and we, try to do our best to, minimize the damage. But it gives us an opportunity to be mindful of that too, and to come back to our intention to do our best, and to communicate that to our children. And as children, of course, sometimes we're in a position to be able to forgive and to recognize parents doing the best they can, and other times, of course, the wounds run too deep, right? And that is, we have to let that stand where it is. So, but this general motif of waking up to, as you said, like estrangement, to distance, to disconnection, to, wait a minute, what's going on here? What am I about to do? And to wake up and say, no, I don't want to do that. That's not, and to come back. It's all, all these motifs run together, and hopefully, we absorb them over time, especially as we get used to really, there we go again.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Can we break out of it? Can we open our eyes and see and choose a new path?
Yeah.
That's
even a little bit better. That'll do.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So I want to just turn us now to a prayer for healing. There's a lot of suffering and pain and illness that's in our world, and some of it is physical, and some of it is emotional, and some of it we've brought on ourselves or others, and some of it we haven't, and we don't know why we are experiencing it. But we want to take this moment to bring to mind the people that we know are in need of healing. You may be calling to mind people you know, friends or loved ones, family, or just the wider world. Groups of people, countries where we know there's so much suffering. And Rabbi Nancy Flam says that we cannot bring healing, but we can help create the conditions that might allow healing to happen. And that's what prayer is. That is our prayer for healing. It is trying to bring blessing into the world, a certain spiritual attunement, openness, compassion that allows healing, or may allow healing, to come to be. So before we sing the prayer, the first prayer for healing of Moshe, praying for his sister, let's just sit for a moment in a blessing practice. There are a lot of variations of this practice. I'll offer one now. Holding in your mind's eye the person or people who you want to pray for this morning, whose healing you want to help create the conditions to exist, to come to be. and sending them blessings, well wishes, by repeating the following phrases in your mind. May you feel joy. May you be healthy. May you feel love. May you be at ease. May you feel joy. May you be healthy. May you feel love. May you be at ease. Continuing with this practice, these phrases in your mind for another moment. And then singing together the healing blessing from our Torah on page 6. El na refa nala, El na refa nala, El na refa nala, El na refa nala.
As we just mentioned, we turn to the sound of the shofar for Rosh Hashanah at this point. And the mitzvah here is not to be the person who blows the shofar, but actually the mitzvah is lishmoa kol shofar, to hear deeply the voice, the sound of the shofar. What I like to think of as the tuning fork of the universe, which invites us to sense the vibrations within us as well of the kol damama daka, the still small voice that is yearning to express itself through us, through our words and our speech. And so the practice of listening to the shofar, of attuning ourselves to the shofar, is really a practice of feeling for the vibrations and what my friend David Friedman calls the spiritual resonance, like two strings being plucked separately, where the vibrations come together. To feel the resonance between our inner voice, inner sound, that's trying to find expression through us, and that cosmic tuning fork that is helping us attune ourselves and align ourselves with the will of the divine. And there are at least four functions of listening for that shofar. One is to, as we said a few minutes ago, wake us up. The shofar urgently seeks to wake us up, to crack through our defenses and our sleepiness, invite us to listen more deeply, to crack open our hearts break through our defenses, commit ourselves to really seeking the truth day by day, live in the truth. And second, the shofar invites us to open ourselves to hear the pain of the world, which can feel so overwhelming and so frightening that we cover our ears and distract ourselves in so many ways. The shofar invites us to be with our own discomfort, to cultivate empathy for that pain and suffering, to not sever ourselves, to stay connected, to be with those who are in pain. And third, the shofar invites us to shift, to move from a stance of harsh judgment, as Shuli was mentioning before, our instinct to look outside and to judge others. And the shofar during these 10 days of tshuva are understood by the rabbis as a reminder for God to shift from the throne of judgment to the throne of compassion, of rachamim. And the same is true for us. Just reminds us to soften our hearts towards others and towards ourselves. And finally, it's a vehicle for transformation. Shofar reminds us, oh yeah, we can be a shofar too. We can lift our voices. We have an inner tzaddik, a righteousness, a moral compass within each of us that helps us transform the breath that moves through us into words that can bring healing and repair and a little more justice into this world. So always prepare to hear the shofar by our Baal Tekiah, Jonathan Silver. I invite you first of all to remind yourself and remember the kol damama daka, that still small voice, the vibrations that we can experience whenever we choose to pay attention, which are present in the inner, almost imperceptible vibrations in our body. The chiyut, the life force that is passing through us and animating us right now, that we can feel in the pulsations of our blood, the pumping of the heart, in the ever-shifting flow of our emotional life, in the firing of the synapses of the brain, forming thoughts, opinions. Kol damama daka, still small voice, voice of God inside each one of us. And then, and now, as we turn to listen externally to the kol shofar, the sound or voice of the shofar, feel for the resonance as the vibrations within meet the vibrations without. And we remember we live within a field of vibration and resonance that permeates this cosmos, always awakening us, always opening us, always softening us, and always transforming us. So let's sit and open our ears and our hearts. Lishmoa kol shofar.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lishmoa kol shofar. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, Shechiyanu v'kiyamanu v'higiyanu lazman hazeh.
And the Musaf Amidah features 3 unique motifs, each of which is punctuated usually by the sound of the shofar, by biblical verses. A triad, Malchuyot, sovereignty, which connotes resting in awareness of the vastness of the universe and of our being an inextricable, essential part of an infinite reality. Zichronot, remembrances, knowing that we are remembered, that we matter, that we are loved. And shofarot, representing the path of redemption, the practice of redemption, awakening to our indispensable role as God's partners in the process of healing this broken world. So I invite you to 3 short guided meditations on these themes. And the first, Malchuyot, resting in the vastness. Malchuyot invites us to experience ourselves as part of something infinitely larger than ourselves, to acknowledge the limits of our knowledge and the limits of our control over life. As my friend and colleague Rabbi Tova Spitzer describes it, Malchuyot means whatever is sovereign in the universe, it's a lot bigger than us. It contains us and we can rest in it. So we can practice Malchuyot simply by bringing awareness to the process of breathing. Though we might try, we can't control our breath. It just comes and goes regardless of our will. We don't take a breath, we receive a breath. We don't exhale a breath, we release a breath. So as we sit in what we might call Malchuyot practice, I invite you to just let yourself become aware of your breath as it arrives at its own pace, on its own schedule, and as it departs. Just resting in that awareness, sort of floating in the flow of breathing without effort, without attempting to control. Letting the breath rise and fall like a wave that rises from the ocean and settles back down, its own pace, its own rhythm. If you notice yourself exerting effort in that regard, just let that go. See if you can let the breath lead and just waltz with your breath. And if any thoughts or emotions come up, just note those and let them stand by the side as you slow dance with your breath. Here's an alternative for Malchuyot. You can use Malchuyot to remember to cultivate a sense of perspective by envisioning something vast and limitless, whether it's a sky, a dark sky full of stars, maybe you witnessed if you were away from the city over the summer, or if you stood by the ocean and saw it disappear into the horizon, or in an open space, or a big sky, or a canyon, or if you've ever visited such a place, just call it into your mind's eye. Remember what that feels like. Just breathe gently in that expanse. Despite any sense we might have of being invisible or insignificant in the face of this hugeness, we remember that we're here. We have a place. In that dark sky full of stars, we are one of those stars. We're a speck of light. In that ocean, we are a ripple. In the desert, we are one of those grains of sand. We're never separate and apart. We can rest in Malchut. Rabbi Jeff Roth shares this story of two waves, one big wave and one little wave in the ocean. And the little wave sees the big wave is crying and says, "Why? Why are you crying?" "Oh," says the big wave, "you're such a small wave. You can't see what I see. All I can see over the heads of our sibling waves all the way to the shore, and we're all dying when we get there." The little wave says, oh, you don't have to cry about that. The big wave says, "Well, if you could see what I could see, you'd cry too." No, really," said the little wave. "If you want, I can teach you something that will set your fears at ease." "Well, what will it cost?" said the wave. "Nothing," says the little wave. "Oh, I know," says the big wave. "You're going to tell me that I have to stand on my head for 30 years or sit with my legs crossed and not move for a week." "Well, why would you do that?" said the little wave. "That would be ridiculous." "You mean," said the big wave, "it won't cost anything? I don't have to do those strange practices? What's the catch?" Little wave thinks for a moment and says, "Well, there's just one small catch. You have to be quiet enough, long enough for me to say just 6 words." "Well, I can be quiet for that long," said the big wave. "Go ahead." And little wave told the big wave, "Well, you're not a wave, you're water. So I invite you to rest in awareness of being an inextricable part of something infinitely greater than ourselves. Take a few moments here to experience yourself not as a wave, but as water. We are held, we are contained in the oneness. We are always the ocean. Zichronot, we are remembered, we matter, we're loved. We can understand Zichronot as inviting us within that vastness to imagine ourselves as being noticed, as being remembered, being known, being loved. Every one of us matters to God. Each of us is remembered and loved. In this passage of the liturgy, we say, as Rabbi Spitzer says, we say to the creative power of the universe, "Ata zocher ma'aseh olam uvoked kol yitzurei kedem." You remember all that you've made within your world. You consider every creature fashioned since the beginning of time. Each has its place within your memory and thought. Just as Noah, threatened by the flood waters, was remembered, just as Sarah, aching to have a child of her own, was remembered, just as Bnei Yisrael, the Israelites, crying out under the burdens of slavery, were remembered, so too each human being is remembered. So here I invite you to practice Zichronot by closing your eyes, softening your gaze, just bringing your awareness inward again. And again, if you're comfortable doing so, I invite you to place your dominant hand over your heart space. Just give it a gentle massage. As you do, breathe into your rib cage, the space around your heart, and allow that space to expand, to soften, to open. Let's practice opening our hearts so that they might better absorb the blessing of knowing that we matter, that we're remembered, that we're loved. I'll share some words of blessing. I invite you to imagine that the universe is saying these words specifically to you. Think of them as well wishes coming your way from the ultimate source of compassion. You might want to attach a face or faces to that source, whether they're people or pets that you associate with a sense of being loved or being cared for. And imagine them sending love and care, remembering you. Or imagine these words coming to you from God, from the source of life. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. May you feel blessed with safety and feel protected. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka. May you be blessed with a sense of well-being and ease. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May you be blessed with peace. May you know that I remember you always. May you know that your life matters to me always. May you know that I love you, imperfect as you are right now and always. Take another moment right here in silence to absorb this great love streaming towards you at all times, here and now. Zichronot. And finally, shofarot. The universe desires to speak and act through us. Shofarot invites us to imagine our very being as a shofar, as a vessel through which the love of the universe can flow. When we hollow ourselves out like a shofar, when we release our attachment to our ego a little bit, when we let down our defenses, when we cultivate a little more spaciousness, when we surrender our self-focus, when we can more easily empathize with the pain of others and access our capacity to be compassionate human beings, that's when we can experience ourselves as a shofar and get ourselves out of the way and let God flow through us. And then we become Klei Kodesh, instruments in a sacred orchestra, and our soul can just sing right through us, unimpeded. Sound of the shofar represents the voice that yearns to flow through us and express the hopes and dreams and needs of every vulnerable human being on this earth. So here I invite us to sit and understand those waves of breath that are rising and falling within us, and to realize this is the universe itself opening us from the inside, striving to express through every one of us the love that sustains the universe, that is yearning to become manifest in words and actions that add even just a little bit more justice, a little bit more healing, and a little bit more peace into this world. As we sit here in the practice of shofarot, let us imagine ourselves as a shofar, As it's hollow, may we empty our egos. As it expands from the mouthpiece outward, may we expand our vision. May we temper judgment and constriction with wisdom, softness, perspective. Just as the shofar expresses the voice of God, may that voice, as it passes through us, bring forth words and deeds from a deeper and wiser place within us. May those words bring blessing and healing to a world that so desperately, desperately needs both. We sit for a few moments in Shofar Road practice.
We'll take these experiences, this understanding of ourselves as something, being part of something larger, this sense of being loved and remembered, and this understanding of ourselves as a conduit for God's love, into our reflection on one of the most powerful and dramatic prayers of this season of the liturgy, Unatane Tokef, which is on page 12 and 13 of our Machzor, and which again we won't recite because we don't have a minyan, but we can reflect on this tefillah, which admittedly for me is getting harder and harder to say every year because it seems more and more real. Just looking at the headlines, the newspapers, it feels like this prayer is what we're reading. Fires and war and earthquakes and flooding and devastation, illness. And it's very hard to say these words and to call these images to mind every year and to think, is this really true? Or is this fate? Is this our fate? Is it really sealed? Is it really preordained on this day what will happen over the course of the year? Who will live and who will die? Where is the space for our own agency, for human action and creativity and free will? I'm not sure that I believe in the theology exactly as it's expressed here, but I do very much believe that this tefillah, that this prayer is a reminder that there isn't such a thing as a world without pain. That part of the human experience and the world's experience is some degree of suffering, of illness, of destruction, and as Mark, you said earlier, throughout history, people have lived through times that have felt so challenging and full of suffering. And I don't think that's going away. And so the question that lies before us is, how do we respond to that? If there is a certain inevitability to suffering, to pain in the world, then what do we do with that? Do we ignore it? Do we deny it? Do we just focus on ourselves and try to protect ourselves from experiencing any of that? Do we get really tight in that fear and in that desire to only have good, to only feel good? Or do we even become so overwhelmed in reading the newspaper and looking at the world around us that we just say, forget it, I'm gonna just curl up in a ball and that's it? Or, and I think this is what Unatana Tokef asks of us, do we ask ourselves, how do I meet the sadness and the devastation and the loss in the world, in my world? How do I actually open to it? Acknowledge its presence. Not try to deny it, push it away, resist it, protect myself from it, but to know that it is here. And the answer is in these three powerful words and the powerful practices of our season. The Jewish tradition's answer is we meet this suffering, we meet it with tshuva, tefillah, and tzedakah. With repairing our relationships with ourselves and with others, with prayer and reconnecting to God and that sense of the infinite, and with action to make things better where we can. This is how I have come to understand Unatana Tokef, that it is an invitation or a push to courageously look at the world, to say, yes, there is fire and famine and illness and loss, and we start with ourselves, with the places where we do have agency to act and to feel and to give. So I invite you now to say these three words out loud or silently, focusing on the movement of your mouth, the shape of your lips and tongue, any sound that you hear, bringing your full attention to the experience of saying these words. Teshuvah, tefillah, tzedakah, teshuvah, tefillah, tzedakah. These are our spiritual tools to become more comfortable with uncertainty, with vulnerability, and to find richness and meaning and connection in our lives, despite the sadness, despite the loss, or maybe even along with it. And with that sense of our vulnerability, we'll take a moment now to remember those who are no longer with us, whose lives have passed. We will say an alternative Kaddish, one that was written precisely for the purpose of honoring the memories of those who are no longer alive when there isn't a minyan. That invokes the same sense of calling out to God, of praise and praising God, even in the face of death, the memory of loss. This is all part of being water, as you said, Mark. Galui v'yadua lefanecha borei olam, sheritzoni lomar yitzkadal v'yitzkadash shemei rabbah le'ilui nishamot. Ela she'en imi asara sheyomru, amen. Yehi shemei rabbah mevorach le'olam olamei olmaya. ובכן ישתבח שמך V'yitpa'ar, v'yitromam, v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar, v'yitalev, v'yitalal, b'sha'a sheYisrael meshabachim otcha, b'vatei knesiot, me'al l'chol birchata, shirata, tushbachata, v'nechemata, da'amiran be'alma, yehi ratzon shetitkabel tefilati lefanecha, v'titen li u'l'chol Yisrael shlama rabba v'chayim tovim, v'chein yehi ratzon v'nomar amen.
Amen. As we bring our contemplative tefillah for this Rosh Hashanah to a close, we're aware that we are entered into a year of Shemitah, a sabbatical year, the 7th year in the 7-year cycles. A year that the Torah teaches us is a year to allow the land, allow the planet to rest and breathe and renew. A year to relinquish our instinct to work the land, to cultivate, to extract, to treat it as if it's for ourselves, to let go of debts that others may owe us, to let go of our instinct to compare ourselves with others and to lift ourselves and our needs above others, to commodify, to manipulate, and instead to remember the deeper truth that it all arises from and belongs to the One. A year of Shemitah. And Rabbi Milton Steinberg, the mid-20th century rabbi of Park Avenue Synagogue, captured the paradox of release, of letting go of that which we are so attached to, and the trust that it requires and that it calls upon us to develop. In a sermon he wrote while he was recovering from a near-fatal heart attack, Rabbi Steinberg stressed the need in that sermon to live fully and joyfully, even while being aware of impermanence and the truth that when we recognize that nothing is fully ours, we express a trust not just in God, but in other human beings and in ourselves. He wrote that we must learn to clasp the world, but with relaxed hands, to embrace it, but with open arms, caring for ourselves and others in our world without succumbing to the illusion that we possess anything. He wrote, it's easier to let these things go, practice Shemitah, because we know that as parts of the divine economy, they will never be lost. The sunset, the bird's song, the baby's smile, the thunder of music, the surge of great poetry, the dreams of the heart and our own being, precious to each of us, all these we can well trust to God who made them. There's poignancy and regret about giving them up, but no anxiety. When they slip from our hands, they will pass to hands better, stronger, and wiser than ours. Milton Steinberg describes this paradox that in surrendering control and possession, whether of things or of people, we can sense nothing is ever really lost. Every wave of life, as it settles back into the ocean from which it arose, remains part of what he called the divine economy. So as we enter into this sabbatical year, this year of Shemitah, this year of release, of rest for the land, rest for creatures and all beings, we are called to clasp the world with relaxed hands, to embrace it with open arms. We're called to let go of our inclination to exploit the planet, to dictate the course of our lives, to control others, to let go of being right. We're invited this year to notice and release the illusion that material possessions can ever be the foundation for true happiness or meaning in our lives. And to remember that everything and every single person arises from and belongs to the same sacred source. Deuteronomy states, Ki kara Shemitah l'Adonai, it's a Shemitah for God. And the medieval commentator Rabbeinu Bachya ben Asher interprets this to underscore that during a Shemitah year like this, quote, we must not act as if we own the earth, but must demonstrate our awareness and agreement that the earth is God's by our behavior in practice. So fatoach tiftach et yadecha, the Torah says, open your hand. Shemitah can be understood as a practice of the open hand, of letting go not only of land and material things, but of privilege and power we may hold. So as we walk together into this fresh new year, may we soften the constrictions that lead us to grip the world and each other too tightly. May we relax our fingers, unfurl our clenched hands, release any sense of entitlement we have, let go of the material or emotional debts we imagine others owe us. May we recognize and let go of the illusion that we own others or have a right to control them. May we loosen our grip on the narratives of our own righteousness and entitlement and open to the pain or fear or need or ego gratification we find when we dig beneath those narratives. So finally, as we enter this year, may we open our hearts and hands and recognize that all power resides in its divine source, and it is entrusted to us while we're here, while we walk this planet, to use only for sacred ends, to heal and repair this broken world. Ken Yehi Ratzon. May this be our will, and may it be God's.
Shana Tova. Shana Tova, Tikatevu, Tikatenu. May we be written and inscribed for a blessed year.